not only am I a licensed mental health therapist who helps her clients with psychedelic integration and using different plant medicines for their trauma, because trauma is my expertise, but I'm also somebody who has gone through a lot of trauma and used psychedelics to help my trauma. So,
Okay, let's talk about that. I want to know about that.
the second part.
Yeah, you can share as much about yourself as you want. Um,
Sure.
what are you comfortable sharing about your trauma, just to kind of put in a picture of where you've
Yeah.
come from and then to where you are now?
Yeah. Um, would you like this to just to be conversational like this, or do you want me to like start with this is who I am and blah blah blah?
No, conversational. You can
Okay,
do whatever you want. This is
perfect.
your game as much as it is mine.
I was just like, is there a starting point? Or some
No,
people edit things and some people don't. So I just wanted to make sure that I was kind of on the right track there. Yeah.
no, you're all good.
Um,
Mine are, yeah, I edit some stuff out. But I usually keep it general and I try to find a starting point. Which
mhm.
is usually the question, like, this is what you wrote. It's like, oh, hang on a minute, she didn't actually write that. So now I have to go and find where is what she wrote. But this is all part of the game, right? I mean, this is all part
Yeah.
of this for me is also part of the trauma of cocking up, making a mistake, and
Mhm.
then not punishing myself, not going, oh my God, what were you doing? How could you not? Like, how could you make that mistake? Now, what are you going to do? The podcast is completely ruined because you cocked up the first 5 minutes.
No, I think it's great. It makes it more interesting. So the question was about trauma and overcoming trauma.
Yeah.
And I do have, like I said, a different perspective because I am a licensed mental health therapist whose expertise is in trauma and suicidal ideation and psychedelic integration. So that's what I do professionally. So as as we start this conversation, understanding that piece. But the other part of that is that I am someone who myself has experienced a lot of trauma, suicidal ideation, and then used psychedelics to help me overcome all of that. There's not anything that I do with my clients that I haven't really done myself, which I think is important. I think it's important to have personal experience in any of the things that you're trying to help other people with. So when I look back, there's a lot of different traumas that I have experienced. Right, I died when I was born, and when I my lungs collapsed, they flight for lifed me to the hospital. I mean, I was dead upon arrival. They resuscitated me, blew my lungs back up. I actually very vividly remember like opening my eyes and seeing my mom's terrified face. That was like my very first memory. Which typically, if you experience trauma at a younger age, you don't really remember it typically because your psyche has disintegrated already. It's already compartmentalized things and it's trying to keep you safe from having to experience that. But I have a very vivid memory of that. Then, of course, I think to some degree, like, vicarious traumas that we all suffer by watching things happen in society or, in our kind of external field, right? Then there's complex traumas that I think can really boil down to anything in childhood that you really needed that you were missing. And I almost think that a good part of childhood is experiencing something like that. A lot of, in my perspective, a lot of us choose to be humans and choose to come so that we have something to overcome so that we can kind of learn those lessons for our soul's evolution, right? Um, then I do have a host of abusive relationships. I have two sexual assaults, one very violent, and just things like that. But I will also say that one thing that I realized in the last year using psychedelics to really heal like the deepest spaces of my trauma is that I was traumatizing myself over and over and over again with the thought processes and the things that I was saying to myself, um, due to the core negative beliefs that these other traumas hammered in so solidly to myself. So I think that there's just this whole host of things. On top of that, one of the things that have really come up within my work and then really come up with a lot of my clients' work recently is just kind of the fear of abandonment or sense of abandonment that we get when our soul enters a body and we come to earth, earth side, as far as those things go. And you'll notice that I have a very holistic perspective. So emotional health, mental health, physical health, and the spiritual health piece as well. So I will speak to all of that as we kind of move through, because I think that one thing that we do wrong in the mental health field is try to utilize talk therapy and logic, and we just try to work through it with our logical brain when honestly our trauma is stored in our subconscious and in our cellular memories in our physical body. So it's kind of a lot of pieces to it for sure.
It is. I really want if you can share what your thoughts were, because I really understand what you said, and I have
Mm-hmm.
talked about this quite a bit, just in kind of my own brain. Is that it's at one point the trauma from my family and the trauma from my past, it stopped. It did. It stopped. It stopped when I walked
Yeah.
away. But the trauma in my head, the program, the things that I was constantly saying to myself, that I think did more damage than what the trauma did when I was younger. So can you share, if you want to, some of the things that you were thinking, some of the things that you were saying to yourself that you recognize now was part of that re-traumatizing over and over and over again?
Yeah. So I had there were a lot of core negative beliefs I had. I'm not lovable. I'm not deserving. Um, but I'm not good enough and I'm not worthy. That one ran so deeply. So when we experience these things, when we're a kiddo, right? Like that's when we start to really develop our thought processes about who we are as a human. When we are like our brain's not even fully developed yet. That's when we start to say, oh, this is who I am. This is the so everything that happens to us in childhood, from all the way up to, I mean, after 25 actually as well, but 25, our brains are fully developed. That's what science is saying. So anything that's happening there is really solidifying who we believe ourselves to be. So anything that happens that gives us a negative message about who we are, we latch onto that and we're just like, this is who I am. So I'm not worthy and I'm not good enough were absolutely, it ran so deeply for me. Now, I showed up last year to my second, so it was my first Iboga, sitting with Iboga, which is a psychedelic. It was my third psychedelic I've ever tried in my entire life. Because mind you, up until 18, probably 2 years ago at this point, I'm like trying to think of, oh gosh, what month is it? I hadn't done any of these things. Like I was against psychedelics. I thought they were drugs. I thought they were horrible. Like I had never had any of those experiences in my life. I drank some alcohol and smoked a little pot when I was in college, and that was like it. And so up until about 2 years ago, I I didn't understand all this. But when I sat down to do a boga for the first time ever, I was dying, like literally my body was dying from two autoimmune diseases that were caused by traumatic stress. So, autoimmune issues are physical diseases that manifest in your body due to stress or chronic traumatic stress. So, these traumas cause that cause your system to kind of turn on, your nervous system to turn on and to not turn off, and you can't flip that switch. And as you can keep going down that route, like your body gets sick from not treating your trauma. So I sat down. I had massive suicidal ideation because at this point I was so miserable with being physically sick from my trauma. And then I didn't realize until I was in the medicine how unbelievably mean I was to myself. So my negative, automatic negative thoughts, I had worked on that, right? I had done the mental health part. I had stopped those thoughts, reframed them. And I was having at this point some automatic positive thoughts. So I'm like, oh, I'm good. Like, I'm so good. And it wasn't until I sat down and I was in that medicine that I realized, because it shows you how unbelievably mean I was still being to myself. I was beating myself up for being sick. I was beating myself up for not being successful enough by other people's standards in my life and in my businesses. I was beating myself up because I seemingly could not lose weight. I single at 39 with no kids. I don't have like the white picket fence. I don't have the life that our society really tells us that we're supposed to have. And so I didn't I thought this is the tricky part too. I thought that I was just motivating myself. I thought that if I told myself that I really needed to lose weight, that then I would be focused on it and I would be motivated to do it. But really, I was just beating myself up for not being able to do it. Or I thought that if I just set these goals and I, pushed myself and told myself, you need to do this, you have to get this done. You're not good. Really, I'm saying you're not good enough. You have to get this done. You're not good enough. You have to meet this goal. That would motivate me to do the things, but it never really did. I never accomplished the things because not only was I overwhelmed with this negativity, but that negativity was keeping my body really, really sick. And it also, on top of that, kept me in a space of bypassing the work to heal the trauma because I was so negative in my head that I would stop and I would switch it to positive and I would try to, I was so caught up in like that work that I wasn't actually taking the time to be like, why do I think that these should be motivating factors? Like, why am I treating myself this way? If someone else treated me the way that I was treating myself, I would not have them in my life. So like, why am I doing this? And it really wasn't until I was in that medicine that I could, like, they were showing me look, you are good enough. Like, how are you not seeing this? And how are you telling all of these people all the time that all they have to do is breathe? That's it. That's all you have to do to be good enough. And you are telling yourself, no, you need to lose weight. You need to do da 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 da. And then I had this massive fear that if I didn't tell myself I needed to do these things, that I wouldn't be motivated to do them. And then I would never reach my goals, or I would never have the happiness that I thought was going to come along with reaching these goals, as opposed to focusing on being happy first, feeling good enough first, and then that stuff all works itself out, right?
There's so
So that
much in
was,
that. There's so much. Like, there's
yeah,
just so much. I'm sitting here going,
it's a lot.
my God, you lived my current reality. That's kind of exactly where I am when I stand. And I don't know if it's this way for you, but for me, it's just this constant feeling of it's kind of morphed from thoughts. Like, I don't necessarily hear the thoughts anymore. I think they're just so far back in the back of my mind. I don't hear the thoughts, but gosh, I feel the feelings. And there's just this
Mm-hmm.
constant feeling of, it's either dread or I don't know if despondency is the right word, but it's kind of like amplified despondency where I can be washing the dishes and I'll feel fine and there'll be nothing going on. And then all of a sudden I just get this, and then the voices start and they say, you're never going to get this done. You're never going to get the house clean. You're never going to be able to get out of here. You're never going to get your business off the ground. You're never going to be a good parent. You're never going to
Yes.
reach the right body weight. You're never going to. It was just this constant. You're never going to do that. Never going to do that. And it's like, oh, and it's just like, oh my god, just take me away in a little bag and just stick me in the ground already, because it's hard to have that voice that is just constantly saying,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, that is like you, that is for everybody else. Everybody else is worthy simply because they breathe. But you, no, that's not, that doesn't relate to you. That's all of them out there. You are, you're nothing. You have nothing. You are nothing. You are like less than nothing. And it's that feeling that you just carry around with you all day. And then that obviously, like you said, it affects your actions, it affects what you do. It also affects your health. For me, it affects my food and my eating, which affects my
Mm-hmm.
health. Um, yeah, it's hard. So let's go from that point where you've done the plant medicine and you've had this realization. Obviously, from my perspective, I could be completely wrong because I've never done plant medicine, but from my perspective, the plant medicine doesn't heal you, it makes you aware of what you have to heal.
Oh.
So, what did you do from that moment when you realized you were spending your entire life picking up your own bat and beating yourself up with it almost
Mm-hmm.
every minute of every day? What did you do from there? Because obviously, this is where I am going, how do I stop this?
Well, and I'm gonna give you just another little quick piece to this too, because there was something else I realized when I was about trauma when I was sitting in that medicine that first time. Um, it also very much showed me that we are energetic beings and that anything that is going wrong in our life, but especially our physical body, is just stuck energy in our bodies and in our energetic field. And I was kind of blown away by that. One of the things that I was taught to do when I sat down with a boga was to move energy. Like the facilitator taught us how to partner with the medicine to move energy. So, mind you, I had stage 4 Epstein Barr. I had Hashimoto's that was out of remission and going crazy when I sat down on that mat. When I got back from that retreat, I had this realization that I had moved the trauma or the stuck energy that was causing those diseases. So I called my doctor a week later, ran the tests, and she's like, I don't know what the hell you have done, but you are testing negative for both of these things. And mind you, I was like not functioning when I sat down on that mat. I was so sick. So, first and foremost, I then realized, okay, I have to continually move energy. So when we hold on to things in our minds, we get stuck in those rumination and those thought loops, and we're triggered, like a piece of our trauma is triggered and we hold on to it and we stick with it and we kind of keep ourselves in victim mode and whatever else. That's holding on to that energy, and that will create a sick body. And I did not want to go back to that. I absolutely did not want to go back to that. So that was one of the first things I took away from that first sitting with Oboga, and then realizing like how mean I was to myself. I will tell you that I sat with Iboga again. I sat with ayahuasca and I used psilocybin. I microdosed psilocybin to help me through the integration process of all of those really big medicines because they're big. And like you said, you are spot on. Psychedelics bring things to our awareness. They help us understand more about who we are individually as a collective. They help us understand, access more of our brains so we have more understanding of just the human condition, period. But we have to be the ones that come back into our lives and make those changes. Because if we don't, then it was, well, first you wasted your time and your money doing the medicine, right? You wasted that experience. I say this all the time, every day. Psychedelics can help absolutely everyone, but not everyone can be helped by psychedelics. Because if you're not ready to come out of that and be a little mind blown and be like, wow, my perception of myself is completely different. My perception of the world is completely different. And I need to make massive changes in my life. And if you're not ready to like do that, it actually almost can be, I don't want to use the word traumatizing.
I have heard that though. It has been for
But it can be. And
some,
it can
yeah,
be, it can cause depression. So like it can
yeah.
almost take you the other way if you are not prepared for what's about to happen here. So
Because this is it. Can I share
I,
something from
yeah,
just
yeah,
from my
yeah.
perspective on that, from my experience? Because I have been aware of what I've been doing for, we're talking like over 10 years. I've been aware of beating myself up. I've been aware of, like, I've been watching myself making mistakes. I've been watching myself making decisions out of fear. I've been watching myself making all of these really bad decisions based on all of this trauma. And when you watch yourself do it and you don't know how to not do it, or you haven't been taught responsibility, or there's not enough willingness to step into responsibility and take responsibility, which is something I've really struggled with, it can be really hard. Like, it has, sometimes I've said to people, because they say, you're so aware, like the awareness you've got is amazing. Like, you must be so far ahead of everyone else. I'm like, no, no, no. Awareness doesn't mean shit. It just,
Mhm.
you can take that awareness and you can run with it like you have and go, I'm changing my life. This is amazing. Or you can take that awareness and then consistently every day beat yourself up because you now know that you are cocking up your life every day and you're also doing nothing about it and you're watching yourself as you do it. So it does, it sends you into a deeper depression.
Absolutely. Which I will say again, like microdosing the psilocybin, which has an SSRI effect in your brain, really helped mitigate the depression I was feeling from, oh crap, like you said, I have this awareness, but like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah.
Which is also why I ended up going back to the medicine, right? Like, so the second time I sat down with a boga, I was like, okay, but show me like how like what else I need to like give me more awareness is really what I did. And then later when I sat down with ayahuasca, I was like, show me what I need to do
Give me the
because you're
physical
right.
steps so I know how to get myself out of this hole.
Yes, yes,
I need
absolutely.
more. Yeah.
So the second time I sat down with a boga, the medicine was like, you really need to accept this. Like you're aware, but you need to accept this. You need to accept, like you said, accept responsibility for all of it now. Now, we know, Nina, that you did not ask for these things to happen to you. We know that, the part of it was universal and just your soul's path. We know that part of it was, other people just like really choosing to be crappy humans. We know that, we know all this. But you have to say, okay, the damage is done. And whether that was done by other people or myself, because it was both for sure,
Yeah.
you have to take responsibility for that. That was hard. But I mean, I knew that. And I would kind of take certain responsibility for certain pieces of it. But then there were just things where I'm like, no, like I am still so angry. So that was the second thing that second sitting with a boga was like, look, we are trying to stomp out the stigma of mental and emotional health. And in doing so, we have made it very okay for people to be sad and to be not okay and to cry. But one thing that we haven't really done very well in that whole realm of things is saying, I'm pissed off. I am angry and I am rageful. I am so mad at other people. I am so mad at the universe, God, whatever you want to call it. And I'm so mad at myself for all of this shit that is happening. And we have to process that anger. So that was the second piece of it. Like, look, Nina, you have to accept all pieces of this. You have to accept. I realized I was so terrified of my anger and my rage because I didn't know what I would do. I didn't know what type of human I would be. We are told that anger and rage is not okay and we should never experience it. We should never feel it. We shouldn't, whatever, when in reality it is perfectly okay. It's necessary even for the process. What's not okay is that we express it inappropriately.
And what
So
did you do with that anger? Because I'm on the same page as you there and I'm listening. And my question was going to be, so how did you deal with the anger? Because I'm guessing that your desire, or where you are because you don't express the anger, because you know if you express the anger, you're going to get punished. And it's either going to be someone else or you who punishes you. But also, most of us were raised in some element with God involved. And if you express any form of anger, like that's a punishable offense from God. I mean, I'm not
well,
Christian, but I was still raised
everywhere.
with that
Yeah,
kind of logic. We all were in some way.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's that punishment of no, 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 don't go there because you'll get punished.
So, and interestingly enough, your liver is highly affected by anger. That's where we store anger. I had stage 4 Epstein Barr. My liver was like almost not working at the time that I sat down that first time, right? So one of the things that Aboga and the facilitator that sat with me in Aboga, she taught us how to move rage by screaming because you are physically moving energy in your body when you do that, your physical body. And so not only did I do a lot of like FU letters to people, obviously I them to these people, but to journal and to get my rage out of my mental space on paper and then shred it, burn it, whatever. So I could kind of process it mentally. And then to move it emotionally, I would scream. I would make sure that if I was thinking about or processing or taking the time, I mean, I took a lot of time isolated to do this work and to like really, okay, I'm going to take myself into my shadow space and I'm going to do this work. And I would make sure that I was moving my body if I couldn't scream, like shaking or doing something somatically, walking, running, jumping. I did a lot of jumping, oddly. Um, those things really helped move that physical energy out of my body. And then honestly, just accepting it and just being like, yeah, I'm really pissed off about this. My dad and I have struggled the last however many years because I didn't realize how much rage and anger I was harboring towards him most of my life. And unfortunately, I have a lot of anger and rage towards my biological father that I don't know. I've never met him. And I have a lot of anger around that. And that also translated into that to my stepdad who stepped in and took that place over. And then there were, just things that like my stepdad and I are so different. We are polar opposites in everything. And we love each other fiercely, but we are polar opposites. So we butt heads all the time. I had so much rage and anger towards him, and that poor man had to kind of get the brunt of some of that last year while I was working through all of my rage and anger because we could not even have a conversation without me like wanting to scream and yell and whatever. So I also had to be very aware and accepting of that so that I could take it in. I mean, and he didn't deserve that. Like we've worked through that, but having to understand like how understand myself and understand how this is going to be projected out to the rest of the world so that I could appropriately handle my anger and understand which situations were going to trigger me to inappropriately handle it. That was another kind of piece I think that was really important. And it was really important to save that relationship with my stepdad because again, like we butt heads to begin with. And then I had all of this rage and this anger. And then of course, I again work in the spiritual realm as well. I think for me, that's a really important piece. So I was kind of tapping into my higher self and like, hey, is there any karmic work that I need to do here? Are there any generational work that I need to do here? Is there any ancestral work that I need to do here? There were days where I could feel like this hurt and this pain in my liver and my womb. And I'm like, what is going on? And, women's reproductive rights were taken away and things like that. So I could tell that there was also all of this other rage and anger once you kind of open that door that I was processing. So I was constantly doing that. And then, plant medicine, part of what plant medicine does is help purge stuck energy from your body. So that's why a lot of people cry. That's why a lot of people yawn. That's why a lot of people, have diarrhea. They throw up. They do all of those things because it's purging that energy through you. So microdosing psilocybin also helped that energy like move through me. Then this is such a long answer. Then
That's okay.
I sat with ayahuasca, and that is one of the most beautiful, most intense, but beautiful medicines I have ever utilized. It's one of the greatest master teachers. But again, if you are not ready for it, I do not suggest it. And I sat down, and by the time I had gotten there, I had done probably, you know, 12, 18 months worth of deep inner shadow work. And I had microdosed BCAPI for quite a while because BCAPI is an MAOI. It works like that in the brain. So it's similar to an antidepressant as well. I wouldn't suggest mixing BCAPI and psilocybin, by the way, because they do similar things. So you have to be careful. But so I felt like I already knew this medicine, and I sat down and I was just like, look, now you need to tell me, you need to show me like what's the next piece to this. Like I am still really angry at myself. I'm still struggling with things with myself and being nice to myself. So once I moved all this anger out from anger towards other people, I was like, well, what do I need to do for me now? And she showed me how to be so compassionate towards myself, so graceful towards myself, have a level of empathy, not just for like my adult self, but my inner child. And this is all work that I do with my clients already, but to translate that into work towards myself was bizarrely mind-blowing. I was like, what? Um, and so I started just really having a deep level of compassion for myself.
How did you do
This
that though? Like what does that mean? How do you if if you haven't had compassion for yourself, then how do you
yeah,
all of a sudden have a deep level of compassion? Like what thoughts changed in your head? Because it must have started on
that's
a
a
thought level. So what thoughts changed in your
mhm.
head?
So asked, I said, can we have a structure? Can you show me a structure? Because, like, again, when I'm in the medicine, I feel this compassion. But when we're on
But
the
in
real world, like,
reality,
I need a structure. I
yeah,
need, my logical brain needs a structure because I, again, know that it's not going to just be a magic pill. And I'm not going to continue to feel that after, DMT searches the serotonin in your brain. I'm like, there's no way. Like, I'm not going to, just be on ayahuasca every day. That would be very interesting. So, it just showed me more of just like inner child work, internal family systems therapy, which again I use with my clients. So it really resonated with me. So every single time it made me it did switch something in my brain to where I was hyper aware of the thoughts. So you know how you said earlier, like how they're kind of in the background and you just don't even really notice that they're happening? It did switch something in my brain. And I think also microdosing the psilocybin, because it that helps neurogenesis and create new neural pathways in your brain. So I, with all of that, I was hyper aware of when I was like not being nice to myself. And every time I would just take a deep breath and I would talk to myself. And I always do this. I just feel like this is where my inner child is at or something. And this is like, feels like a hug to my inner child, right? Over my heart space. And I would just take a deep breath and I would take a moment and I would just speak to myself as if that thought process or that negativity or that bully in my head was either a 3 year old throwing a tantrum or a 13-year-old throwing a tantrum. And I would just be like, oh man, you know what? I know, like this does suck. Like this is really difficult. This is really sad. Yeah, I know you're really angry about this. We should be angry about. Like I was just, if I was a super unbelievable, loving and compassionate mother, how would I treat myself in those moments if I was speaking to a child? And I just kept doing that over and over and over and over. And it just kept creating this deeper level of all of these things. And so I I don't know. Eventually, that just shifted. I was just so compassionate with myself in any given moment. And I took the time. So here's the other thing. Back when I was a perfectionist and trying to, I was working 80 hours a week trying to have a successful business. And then I was trying to go to the gym for hours a day. I mean, I was trying to do like all of these things out of my trauma responses to make myself good enough. I never had the time to do the work in the moment. I was like, oh, I'll just do it later. I'll do it later. And I would set aside days to do my inner work, but that's not how this works. So every time it did not matter what I was doing. Because honestly, if you think about it, if a child needs you, you are going to stop I mean, if a child is like freaking out and needing you, you're going to stop what you're doing and you're going to help that child. That child is priority over whatever else is going on. And so I would stop and I would make it a priority. I would make myself a priority. I've never made myself a priority ever in my life, except for up to like 6 months ago. And now like it's mind blowing how much I was neglecting myself and how much I was bullying myself to neglect myself or bullying myself about neglecting myself. Like insane.
Do
And I
you
was
think that
just,
also came from a belief from younger that if you ever did what you wanted to do instead of what your parents wanted to do, you were selfish? Especially as a
oh yeah,
teenager. Like we're all
yeah.
selfish as teenagers.
Hmm. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
because that's really hard to
And
push past, especially when you're a mom. So I'm a single mom. And that like
oh yes.
that just it's like just whack that shit on a megaphone and it just makes it so loud. It's like, no, I can't. What are you talking about? I can't sit and take time for myself to be compassionate. That's just a bit ridiculous. I've got all of this to do. It's hard.
Yeah. I think that so I don't have my own children. Um And I think that it is an extra layer of difficulty for adults that have children to make themselves a priority in any way, right? Because your children always trump you, even because, I mean, they need you to survive. Like you're an adult, you're probably surviving.
Well, like you also just
So,
said to yourself, I treat my inner child as if it was a child, and we all like if I was a
mhm,
parent to that inner child, I would always put it first. It's like, yep.
right. So it's even in those given moments, taking a second to be like, okay, well, what would I say to my child right now if they were coming at me like this, even if they were coming at me like some of I'm not going to say the nasty things I've said to myself because it's really bad, but if a rageful teen, because that's the anger part of me, I have discovered, if a rageful teen came at me and said some of the things that they were saying, I wouldn't Like I would be so loving and compassionate because I know that that anger, one, is probably valid in their teenage world, right? And two, is coming from a place of hurt. Anger is a secondary emotion. It is preceded by fear, overwhelm, or sadness almost every time. Almost every time. So you're feeling a sense of fear, overwhelm, or sadness when you're coming at yourself with anger, or when a child is coming at you with anger, that's what they're feeling. So having to, if you can get in the habit of making yourself a priority in every moment that it happens, and you can squash it right away, then you don't have to take, those big chunks of time to find the time for the compassion and whatever for yourself, if that makes sense. So it actually becomes, once you've developed the skill to do it right away, like, okay, well, if a child comes to you with a bleeding finger and you're like, oh no, I'm busy right now, like I'll deal with that later, and 4 hours later, then the child has passed out because it's lost so much blood, and you have to spend extra time going to the ER and doing all the things, when really you could have just put a band-aid on the finger and you'd have been okay. That was a really bizarre example, but you get what I'm saying.
I
So
do. But it's also really interesting that you share the example of a rageful teen, because I don't know about your teenage years, but my teenage years, and you said, now if you had kids and you had a rageful teen coming to you, you would be you would be calm, you would be relaxed, you'd be compassionate, you'd be thoughtful, you'd be all of these things. But my
mhm,
upbringing was, when I went to my mum as a rageful teen, what I got in return was rage.
mhm,
And there was a
yeah,
lot of yelling and a lot of screaming and a lot of fighting. And so we don't have that as our anchor. So then you've got to go through the process of learning
mhm,
the compassion, learning when you are raging, but what you know is rage in return or punishment in return, is to relearn that into compassion, which is all. I kind of see all of this as, we just have to learn how to do what we have done, for me 47 years and for you 39 years, or what was 40 years,
yeah,
in a
yeah,
completely different way to what
yeah.
we experienced it.
Yeah. So the reason why I said if I had a rageful teen now and I could do that is because I've worked through my stuff and I have this understanding and I can do that. One of the reasons why that doesn't happen when when you present anger to another person, whether it's a child to an adult to adult, even a child to a child to child is a little bit different because they just don't have the skills. But one of the reasons why we're confronted back with anger is, one, because our survival instinct kicks in and we're like, okay, I'm ready to fight and defend myself so this person doesn't kill me. Like it's this weird egoic thing, right? So we have to learn how to keep our nervous, like our physical, like that's a physical response. So we have to learn to keep our physical nervous system and body down and say, oh no, brain, we're not actually about to die here. It's okay. We're going to handle this. So that's the first thing, like really learning how to calm your physical body. The second part of it is a lot of times it triggers unhealed wounds within us. And if we're confronted with that trigger, then we want to respond back with, whatever anger and rage we have, because we have pent up anger and rage because we haven't taken the time to appropriately release it. So, been probably since ayahuasca, there's been two times where I have been in confrontations with people and they were like big and like angry, like yelling fingers, whatever. And I just sat there so calmly and waited for it to be over so then I could express what I was feeling. And I was very matter of fact of how I was saying things. And I was just like, look, like, and here are my boundaries and blah, blah, blah. And the other person was kind of blown away. And I'm like, you clearly needed to get your anger and rage out, but like, you probably should work on that on your own time so that you're not coming at me like that. that's just my suggestion, right? But they're just like, how are you able to do that? And I said, well, I just don't have, I spent literally like 12 to 18 months doing nothing but moving anger and rage out of me, because most of my anger and rage was from me not feeling good enough, me not feeling worthy, and trying so hard to act when I didn't need to. And I know where I'm not good enough and I'm not worthy came from. I know where my childhood wounding is for that. And I spent 12 months moving anger and rage over that situation. And now I just don't have it and I just don't feel it. And I just don't, it's just not there anymore. And I'm not saying that there aren't, times where I'm probably going to be, I mean, I'm human, right? Like there's so many more wounds I'm sure I have to deal with. And I'm probably going to be anger and rageful at other times too. So, I mean, there's still work to do always, but around a lot of it, like I have, and on a daily basis, I move energy. So the other day, someone cuts me off when I'm driving and I'm the only one in the car. I'm like, and I'm moving the anger that I felt from that because it was just rude. Or someone, says something rude to me or does something that hurts my feelings. I'm like, oh, okay, like where's the sadness? Let's have that compassion. But then yeah, let's journal about the anger. Let's get it out. Like I don't want to hold on to it anymore. But part of it is because I also know that anger is stored in your liver, and my liver was not functioning. And after I moved that anger and rage, my liver started functioning. And I was all sorts of doctors, all sorts of treatments, supplements, whatever. Nothing helped except for moving that anger and rage. So I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to be sick anymore, you know?
I get that. I really, really do. Which is kind of why, not only why, there are so many reasons you understand. You go, this is why I'm on this journey. It's like, no, no, there's like 1,000 reasons behind
So
why
many.
I'm on this journey. But this is
Yeah.
one of them for the same of you. I had Epstein-Barr, um, and
Yeah.
I thankfully, I don't know if I've completely cleared it yet. I think I cleared a lot of it, but I also think I kind of shoved a fair amount of it into a box, into Pandora's
Mm-hmm.
box, which was the anger. And it's really interesting because I have a severe intolerance to gluten and dairy. I've never done the testing. I will never say I'm celiac because I refuse to go and do the testing for it. Uh,
Yeah.
but if I touch it in any way, then I will get reactions on my fingers. I'll get reactions on my legs as if I've ingested it. And it's not common. It's really unusual. Um, None of the celiac societies will validate it, but it happens. And I know that something happened around the time of me getting the gluten intolerance. I ended up with glandular fever, and I
Mm-hmm.
was sick. And when I got glandular fever, which is where Epstein Barr comes from, when I got glandular fever, that changed everything for me. All of a sudden, I went from being healthy to not being healthy, being able to sustain weight to not being able to sustain weight, being able to eat food to not being able to eat food. Like all of my issues kind of started around the age of 16 when I got really sick. And I think there was something in that time frame over the course of a couple of years because my mum started drinking really heavily around that time. She really went full blown um, alcoholism at that point. And she went through her own mental breakdown, that all the anger and rage, hate, and the grief and the sadness is all sitting in that box that comes out as gluten, dairy, Epstein
Mm-hmm.
Barr. I also had H. pylori and the eating disorder. Like it all comes out in that box.
Yeah.
And it's all rage. It's all that rage that you just don't
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to take any of this out on anyone. I don't want to take any of the rage out on anyone. I kind of every now and then it comes up and it does come up and out. And it's like, oh damn, I don't want that to keep coming up and out.
Well, be graceful with yourself because part of the reason it's coming up and out when it's triggered or kind of provoked in those moments is because it's not coming up and out in other times. So,
Yes.
and if you don't know that, or you don't know how to do that, or you don't know what to do with that, then it's gonna wait until, you shake the bottle of emotions and it's gonna explode, right?
It's also the
So,
permission, not giving yourself permission to. So I hear you
yes.
saying you would sit and you would journal and you would move your body and you would move that energy. But for
Mhm.
me, there's no permission for me to do that yet. There's no approval of, yes, and I used to do it a long time ago. I dealt with so much stuff and I used to move my body all the time. And I used to do so much energy work on myself and created my own tapping technique so I could move the energy. But now there's no approval, there's no permission, there's none of that there. So, did you have an issue with approval and permission for you when you started doing this?
Oh, absolutely. But that was the second time I sat down with the Boga. They were like, look, you need to accept this. Like, look, if you're not accepting that you're angry and that you're rageful and that you need to process this, like nothing's like
Nothing's going to
you're
change.
just gonna be, yeah, nothing's gonna change. And so I was like, okay. And then it was,
Oh, hold on. You've just frozen on me.
and part of it too, like
Hold on. You
one,
just unfroze. Can you
yeah,
go back and say what you just said? Because after
yeah,
you went into,
absolutely.
because you just froze. I'm like, no, she's frozen. Come
Can,
back and say
can
all
you
that
hear me
again.
now?
I can hear you now.
So yes, when I sat down with Aboga the second time, it was really like you have to accept this. And then it was still a process though. One, I would make sure that I was by myself, completely isolated. Nobody was home. Like I was by myself when I made the intentional time to process anger because I didn't want somebody to come home and then me act like be mad and take it out on them. The other thing I did was again continuing to because it's a little tricky. When your brain gets caught on this anger, you don't want to ruminate on it. You don't want to be like, oh, yeah, I'm angry about this and that person did me wrong. And then you just like keep, you're holding on to it. You have to let it go, which is why the physical somatic piece is so important because it helps move it so that you're not holding on to it because I also, didn't want to take it out on somebody later. I didn't want to do this in the morning and have it ruin my day and then me just like spew hate at everyone. So then also that's where some of the psilocybin microdosing and the BCAPI microdosing came in because it helped mitigate the depression I was feeling from processing all this anger. And then I just had to be very aware of okay, now I'm starting to give myself permission. And it would take time. I would sit in my bedroom and just be like terrified to do anything with this rage. And so then I'd have to have this compassion for my inner child and be like, why are we scared? And I mean, I was like, because literally I don't know what you're about to do right now. Like you were told anger and rage is wrong. And I don't know how you're about to react. And it's scary. Like I don't know what you're about to do. And it's scary. And so I would have to like talk myself through that and have a lot of compassion. I really had to get my inner child. And again, when we talk about inner child, that's just a way of kind of externalizing parts of ourselves so that we logically can understand what we're doing, right? Um, I had to really get that part of me on board because I was so scared of my own anger and rage, so scared. And then when I was going through all this anger, processing all of this, I really wasn't feeling good enough because I'm like, I shouldn't be so angry. Like, it's not okay to be angry. So then that was a process of being like, no, it's actually okay to be angry. It's an important emotion. It's just valid emotion. And really, the only thing that people get upset about, they blame the emotion for when people express the emotion inappropriately and it has nothing to do with the emotion. It has nothing to do with what we're feeling. And so I had to also remind myself, like, this is an emotion that's coming up. Like, even when, my stepdad would talk to me and I was processing all this anger and rage around, all the things, and I would just be like, I just want to like, ugh. And I would have to be like, Nina, it's okay to feel this emotion right now. And thank you for this gift. Like, I can see that there's still more work to do here, but expressing that at him right now when he's literally just trying to help you with something, or you're trying to help him with something, or he's just there, is not, it's not fair to him. It's not okay. And it's not fair to me as an adult to have these issues with my dad when it was old hurt and pain. So I really had to, like, you really have to get to know yourself with that emotion, and how it expresses in you and how it expresses out of you and how to work with it. And again, anger and rage is not one that we're taught to work with, because we're just taught we shouldn't have it and we shouldn't feel it. So I really had to learn, like, not just how to move it, right, or how to process it logically, but also, like, what does it feel like in my body when it's starting to come up, so I can, like, calm myself down. Does calming myself down even work? Does How do I keep moving this so I'm not ruminating on this and creating more depression? How do I not get stuck when I'm doing this work? And I think a lot of people don't do the work because the emotions feel so big, right? Sadness feels so big, hurt and pain feels so big, overwhelm feels big. And so then we're just like, oh, I'm not going to do that, because we don't know how to work with them within ourselves. And we're afraid that we will get stuck in that. People do get stuck in it. That's why we have depression. It's called depression, right? But going to someone who's versed in how to do these things, and unfortunately, I can't say that all mental health therapists are versed in emotions. Most of them are versed in the mental game. That's, you know, what a lot of the training's in. I think now, and I will say this, of all the research I've done over the years, Australia is a little bit ahead of the game when it comes to mental health, as far as understanding some of these things, or at
Really?
least in the
I don't
programs that
I don't know about
I,
that.
I'm gonna say, in the programs that I have researched, like, I'm like, okay, like, they have this understanding. How come we're not doing that over here? But
But the support still
so
isn't here. Like they still there
is it
are a
still a
couple of
struggle?
there are a couple of amazing people that are really getting into nervous system work. Um,
Yeah.
there's a lady, actually, she's about an hour up the road from me. An hour up the road. Oh, she's just up the road. Um, in Australia, an hour is just up the road. Um, and she's doing amazing nervous system work, and she really understands the trauma, but she doesn't go into the depths of the anger. She doesn't go into what we're talking about. It's still very much mental. It's still very much stuck in that let's talk about our past. Let's just talk. So many people are still doing in therapy talk therapy. It doesn't matter where, even she's actually a somatic therapist, but she still spent a lot of time just talking about my past and about my story. And that's been my experience, like my personal experience when I've seen different, whether it's a psychologist or a counselor or some kind of therapist. It has always been talk based.
I will say it's interesting also how this has changed my work, because now at this point, I do a lot of virtual therapy, and at this point, I don't have any of my clients sit still when we're talking. We're tapping, we're moving, we're doing this. We're Sometimes they're pacing the room, because you're not moving it throughout your body. You're not moving it somatically. You're just processing it in your brain. Well, I'm sorry, but you've probably stewed in your brain all dang day before the session. So how is just, getting it out of your mouth? Like, you could do that at home, and whatever else. And I know that, like, it's really important to hold space, and talk therapy is amazing coping skill, but it is not going to help you move and heal if you're not clearing your energy and doing energy work, if you're not paying attention to the physical signs and understanding the physical signs of emotions and whatever else in your body, and if you're not moving it physically in the body. So at this point, I don't really even have my clients sitting still when we're talking, or, doing something. And if they're too tired to like move or whatever, then, I'm making sure that I'm trained in Reiki and energy work and those things. And so I'm making sure that I'm at least trying to provide that, because they can't, they're like, Nina, it's been a long day. I just want to talk. Okay, that's cool. Understand though, this is limited. Like, they understand like what it is. And people need to talk, because we don't always have that person to talk to that's not going to judge us, that's not going to whatever. Like, we need people to talk to. We need that coping skill,
Mm-hmm.
1000%. But these other pieces, and even just recently, I had spoken to a handful of my clients, and I'm like, look, I'm trying to figure out a better way, because now, things in America are changing quite a bit as far as like insurance and whatever else. And so people are having to limit their time, because either they don't have the time or they don't have the finances to make mental health a priority, or to make coming to see me a priority. And so I'm trying to figure out, how do I provide you with these pieces, all of these pieces, to get you really good healing in the limited time that I have with you. And so I've been moving to a couple of different things, and then having them, I have a digital toolkit that I use with them, and might go into the digital toolkit and do these exercises, these meditations, these somatic things, these things in between our sessions, because it needs to be a whole person thing, a whole person situation, mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health. We need to do all of that at the same time. And it needs to be a consistent life practice, and not just something that you do for an hour a week. So more of what I actually do now with a lot of my clients is teach them the skills to make it a consistent life practice. So they're constantly doing their inner work. One, so it doesn't feel overwhelming, because it's happening in small increments. And two, they're getting all of the pieces that they need. Because for me, that making it more of like talking about having that compassion for myself, making that a consistent life practice, helps me not have those moments of just overwhelm with big emotion and meltdown and breakdown and losing my stuff, because I'm slowly letting the cap, like the air, out of the bottle instead of it blowing off. Or I just am not even putting the cap on the bottle at all, so that when it shakes, I'm just dealing with it as, just wiping up the mess as it goes, as opposed to letting it build up and become a much bigger situation, to be honest.
Which is not that easy for people because, and you brought up a really good point about kind of the whole mental health area, because you can go and have talk therapy to someone, but like you said, it's not just one piece. And over here, we have a system where you can have 10 free sessions a year. So every year you can have 10 free sessions, and you can either do those over 10 weeks, you can do one a fortnight, or you can do one a month. And you get 10 free sessions with either a counselor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. But at the end of those 10 free sessions, which are covered by Medicare, which is like our free health cover over here, mm-hmm. you then have to start paying for those sessions. Like you said, it's not just one piece. So then if you're going to a somatic therapist who's going to help, if you can't move the energy in your body, then at least a somatic therapist or a massage therapist or a lymphatic drainage therapist, like someone can physically put their hands on you, or a Reiki master can put their hands on you or run energy into you to help you move that. But then you go and do, let's say you do exercise at the gym, or you go to a dance class, or you do something else because you need to physically move your body. By this time, you're doing 3 or 4 sessions a week. And now you're looking at, well, each person now, let's say a therapist over here, I don't know what they charge over there, but now a therapist over here can charge anything up to $250 to $300 an hour, which is insane. But because the people who need that support generally don't have $250 to $300 an hour to spare. And then the gym
Yes.
membership, and then you do the dance classing, and everything's going up. And now you're spending, let's say, $400 a week on just trying to fix your mental health. But who has $400 a week to just give away
Mm-hmm.
to a whole pile of people? It's, yeah, it's really crazy. It's insane. And I
It's
guess that's why I'm loving these podcasts, because and everyone else that's doing these kind of podcasts is because we're able to have these conversations and get ideas and go, okay, well,
yes.
what else can I put into my toolkit that I can do for free at home? And like
Mm-hmm.
you said, you could just move. Like you said, you can just get up and you just move your body and just let it move wherever it wants to go, or sit down and journal, or even stand up and journal and start writing, and then move your body and then write again and move your body,
Yep.
and have a
Mm-hmm.
whole pile of things that you could do that don't cost you anything, but potentially have exactly the same outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying also about making it like a consistent life practice, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so really teaching people the skills or getting people the skills. So that's why I created the digital toolkit, is so that they could learn the skills and kind of make it more of a life practice. But again, it's they're not having to come to therapy and pay me $175 an hour to learn that. They can learn it from the toolkit. There's a couple of different like online courses were very specific that I've created to make, like, here, learn the skills of how to work with your inner child by taking this online course, so that you have the skills, so that you don't have to spend, you know, 4 sessions at $175 an hour to learn that. You can just, for $20, take this course and like utilize it and learn it. Now, it does still take time in the beginning to create these skills, and that can be really overwhelming because there's a lot of them, right? And so to have the support or whatever else. But that's also why in the next 6 months, like, I'm moving to more adding a group therapy option so that it's cheaper, and a group of people come and they learn the skills. So they're not really, it's not talk therapy where they're talking about their things, but it's where they come and they learn the skills. So a lot cheaper, they can learn the skills. And then if they, want to talk to me, they can. If they want to talk to somebody else about the things that are going on and use that coping skill elsewhere. Because the problem is that people do, when they come to therapy, they're like ready to spew it all out. Not they have not talked about their stress or any of their things, and they're like, oh, I just need to get this out. And then I don't have time to teach them these life skills. So we're being effective, but it's not as effective as it could be very quickly. So adding in this second piece, whereas if you are in talk therapy with me, you get the toolkit free, you get the like the skills course free. For other people that aren't my regular clients, they have a lower price that they can pay for that if they can't afford therapy. So trying to figure out these different pieces, because I totally, I was feeling the exact same way. Like, I don't have enough money to do all the things I need to do to have other people take care of me, but I need these skills. But that's also what led me to plant medicine, was because I was able to understand that, well, it's not exactly what led me to plant medicine, but once I was led to plant medicine, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I can move massive amounts of these things and learn these skills very quickly. But when I decided to do my work with plant medicine, I literally isolated myself for 18 months, pretty much. Didn't really talk to people, or didn't anything much outside of my own inner work and working with my clients. That's all I had the capacity to do, because I dove in and spent, and not everybody has the time for that, right? But plant medicine helped me move so much in one weekend that, again, the next part of it was just to do the integration and to just utilize the skills. So it was still a little bit easier than having to go to therapy so many times to move all of this and to have these realizations and these awarenesses, then to integrate and utilize the skills. So I do think that it definitely expedited the process for me 100%.
For sure. It probably, I think if these plant medicines were out when I first started doing my shadow work, which was 17 years ago. I opened the door. When I first started doing this shadow work, it was me sitting in isolation, in meditation for sometimes 7 or 8 hours a day. I did that for like 3 years. I was lucky I was in the position where I could do it at the time. And so I did. I took 3 years of where I just sat on the couch and just went in and just went and peeled off every layer. And so I've met every shadow I have. I've met every sub-personality. I've met every part inside of me. I know what all the stories are. I know what all the trauma is. I know what all the programs are. And that's where I say awareness is awesome, but it's not everything. It's not every piece of the puzzle.
The
But
first one.
but plant medicine probably would have like knocked 5 years off that. And so you do plant medicine a couple of times, and all of a sudden my 17 years could have been streamlined down to a couple of ayahuascas or like a couple of different trips. And but it wasn't
Yeah.
out back then, and also it wasn't something that was my journey. And I still don't think I would ever take the path of plant medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just because I like the I like the journey. I like the struggle. I liked all the processing. Like there's not a whole lot I didn't enjoy about doing
Yeah.
all of that peeling back of all those layers. It was hard, as
Mm-hmm.
it's hard, and to spend so much time just sitting there staring at yourself. It's not
Yeah.
easy, but I think it's great that plant medicine is there now for people
Yeah.
who want to do it,
And
who don't have the time.
yeah, and like I said, this my own, because I'm the same like you. Like I like doing my inner work. Like it's hard, but there I do enjoy the process, and I enjoy the process of getting to know myself better. My personal stuff is not what took me or what brought me to plant medicine. Right now it's like a major movement in the mental health field. And I was having a lot of clients. I lived in an area where there were a lot of people spending a lot of money going to Mexico doing ayahuasca, coming back, and then like not having any integration. And I was like cleaning up these messes, like going, what is this stuff that you're doing? Like, this is insanity. And
So you
then
went down and went, well, if it's insane, I may as well go and do it.
well, really what happened was I was realizing that if because I'm a holistic and integrative therapist. So if you're off doing some crazy insane plant medicine, you're not going to want to come back and have a traditional therapist. So a lot of people were ending up in my office because they thought like maybe I knew about this stuff. I did not at the time. So then again, I don't do a lot with my clients that I haven't done myself. So I finally was like, okay, I need to study these medicines so that I understand what they're experiencing, so that I can understand how they got to where they got in their mind of that, so I could help them. And then I fell in love with the different cultures and the different indigenous communities. And I just fell in love with it. And I was like, wow, are like people have used these for bajillions of years and all these things. And so then I took my first psychedelic and I did mushrooms, and I was like, because that was actually decriminalized where I was living. So a lot of people were doing mushrooms, and they were doing stupid amounts of mushrooms that they never really should have been doing, and having these bad experiences. And so I'm like, well, let's just see what this is like. And I was like, wow, I definitely see how, if used appropriately, this can help people's anxiety, trauma, and depression. Like, I was just mind blown. And then that started me down the path of, well, I guess I'm going to do all the psychedelics now and figure out what this is, what each one of these is like, because I think they're all different, and they are all very different experiences to be utilized very differently. People ask me all the time because, of course, like, when you sit with ayahuasca, you're in that for like 14 hours. Like this is a big deal, right? So people ask me all the time, like, Nina, do you have to have like, I don't want to be tripping for 15 hours. Okay, cool. Like I get that. Like not everybody, that's not everybody's thing. So I have a couple of people in my life that are never going to do their shadow work, have lots of trauma, but do not want to address it, do not want to address the emotions, and then definitely never going to do massive amounts of psychedelics. But they are microdosing psilocybin. And it is just, again, when you have that shaken pop bottle and you know how you like slowly let out the air so it doesn't blow off, that's what it's doing. And these people, even with just these small amounts, and microdosing is subperceptional, so you don't feel it, you don't even notice you're taking it, which then you're like, well, how do there's no psychedelic effect or anything, but it surges your serotonin, you do feel happier, and you do actually it still does neurogenesis in your brain. So um, people are still seeing a lot of success with these things. And then another part of it is a lot of my clients were on antidepressants, on them for a very long time. They have such unreal and unbelievable health consequences and trying to come off of those things. The other day I was sitting here and I don't have TV, but I was at my parents' house and a commercial came on and it said, oh, I was like, how do people do these things? Well, because they listen to their doctors and they don't ask questions and whatever, and they don't always see the commercials, right? This commercial was for a medication that said, oh, if you're still feeling depressed on your antidepressant, why don't you add this medication to your antidepressant to help with the depression that your antidepressant is not helping you with? Here are some of the side effects, a whole host of physical deals, added depression, increased suicidal ideation. I was like, why are
Sign
we
me
doing this?
up.
Why are we doing this to ourselves?
I
But
don't
the
know.
thing is that the doctor doesn't go through all of those things. It's just listed on the little sheet that you get when you pick up your prescription, and the doctor's going to say, "Oh, this is going to help you feel better. It's fine." And and then I've had clients coming off of antidepressants have such horrible physical symptoms that they cannot function, and the doctor's just like, "Oh, well, you should just go back on your antidepressant." And they're like, "Well, it wasn't doing any good, but now like I'm miserable. Like I can't," not understanding that it takes sometimes up to 12 months for that medication to titrate out of your body and completely metabolize out of your body. So you can have these really horrible, I mean, we're talking brain fog, migraines, muscle aches, joint pain, like they cannot function. And so a lot of them will end up back on it. So these plant medicines that have these effects, the same effects as antidepressants. I use Blue Lotus, which is a dopamine agonist, to sometimes help with depression. That is legal. Be Happy, which is legal here, is works as an MAOI, which is a classification of antidepressants, and psilocybin, which is legal certain places and not legal some places, works as an SSRI, which is also a classification of antidepressants. They literally do not have, if you are microdosing them correctly, you will get the same effect as you had on your antidepressant, but they metabolize out of your body a lot easier because they're just plants. Like your body is made to metabolize them. So, that's another part of the work that I've been doing is helping people understand how to microdose these things so they don't have to utilize the man-made medications. I don't even know why I ended up on that tangent or how I got down that rabbit
Because
hole. But
somebody needed to hear it.
I guess there's somebody
this
out there.
this has been such an awesome conversation. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's a lot.
It is a lot. Can you, before I forget, because I do forget, can
Yeah.
you share where people can find you, your website, whatever information you want to share?
Yes. Yes. I actually have a few businesses now. This really went from my private practice to a whole bunch of other things. You can find me at www.onelifeholistichealth.com. that is going to be my psychotherapy private practice, but there's also that's all the mental health stuff. Or you can find me at www.ninajcoaching.com, which is going to be a lot of the plant medicine stuff that I do. And then I am creating some of these medicines for people, and that business doesn't come out to the fall, so I can't give you the website. But um, I wanted people to have access to ethical and sustainable and quality medicines, the legal ones. So we'll be doing that.
That was that was a really eye-opening episode for me. Mainly around, oh, there was so much at the end around the plant medicines, which was really, really interesting because I have my own judgments around plant medicines and also my own fears. Having done psychedelics in the past, not microdosing, and it wasn't in a safe environment, not like it is now. So I have those prejudgments, pre-thoughts, the experience already that kind of turns me off, and I'm okay with that. As I said to Nina at the end of the call, I said I'm happy on my bike. I'm happy going through my journey on a bike. I don't need right now to get on a freight train and barrel through. I'm actually okay doing it the way I'm doing it. But for other people, they want that. They want that support. They want that different support. They want to experience it in a different speed. And that's okay too. And going back to what she shared about her thoughts and the compassion, I think the biggest thing I got out of this call was I'm not being compassionate to myself enough. And I don't mean that in the way that I'm picking up a bat, bashing myself over the head and punishing myself for I'm not doing it enough. I mean, I take I take moments throughout the day sometimes where I'll go, it's okay, you're all right, it's okay. But I am not having these lengthy conversations with myself, and I am not having these conversations with myself as if I was my daughter or my child to the level that I think Nina did it, to the volume that she did it each day. There's a much bigger capacity, which is always much easier to do when you are on your own and you can go into isolation and you don't have to cook food for anybody, or you don't have to prepare anything for anybody, and there's no expectation on you, there's no responsibility other than you and yourself. It's always going to be easier to do this kind of work under that kind of experience. But for me, I don't have that. As my daughter frequently points out, Mom, did you know that you have, I think I'm up to 59 mouths to feed, because I've got chickens, geese, guinea fowl, cats, and dogs, and my daughter and myself. And yeah, 59 mouths to feed that I have to feed multiple times a day, because a lot of them are babies at the moment. So I have to feed them multiple times a day. And it takes away from that time to spend on myself. So I think that's what I got from today. Uh, it's it's going in it's going in my toolkit, and I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to, I don't want to say try, because I feel like saying try means I'm not going to do it. But I don't know if I can commit to it, because I know myself. I know that I'll say yes, I'm going to do this, and then 3 days in, and I'll stop. I haven't had a conversation yet with anyone about that, about doing things for 3 days and then stopping. So I am waiting for the person that has that wisdom to share that wisdom with me, because I think that's going to be a game changer for me. Anyway, enough prattling on. Please make sure you like and subscribe to this video and share it. This is a great conversation. Please share it with anyone that you feel would benefit from this. And remember to go to the description below if you want to go and check out Nina. Amazing woman. If you wanted to go and get some coaching and mentoring with her, she has this holistic belief around mental health. Go and check her out. And if you want to check me out, you can go to lovecreatesfreedom.com. I am starting free mentoring. I'm dipping my toe in. I used to do a lot of mentoring many, many, many years ago. And yeah, I really love to get back into having clients. So if you want to join that, you can. Lovecreatesfreedom.com. Thank you. And remember, you are truly appreciated.